So in case you've been sleeping under a very nice boulder,
I like that boulder. That is a nice boulder.
Shrek 4D has been announced by Universal Studios Orlando that it'll be closing in January of next year, 2022.
Bye-bye. See you later.
And of course, the question on everybody's mind is what's gonna replace it? Because obviously Universal, whenever they do close a ride, you know something is coming in its wake. That's just how it is at Universal. They don't dilly-dally with these things. So, what's it gonna be? Well, I think it's pretty important to actually discuss why Shrek 4D was removed in the first place. It might sound like a pretty obvious thing to say. Well, it was old, Shrek hasn't had a movie in years. Sure, all those things are true, but I still think that Shrek is pretty popular, so he could still support his own attraction. The problem here is, and I think the main crux of it, is not only because it was old, but because it was an outdated ride system. The 4D theater has been outdated for years. This is not necessarily a thing that should be at a Disney or Universal park, though yes, I know Disney still has some at their parks, but the point being is that you can find these at your local science center, you can find them on the boardwalk, you can find them in museums, you can find them at regional parks, right? These are no longer super interesting or innovative attractions, which is what you expect for the money you're paying to go to Universal or Disney. So that's one. The other thing being that the film itself was available on DVD literally a year after the ride came out, and now is available on Netflix. So there's really nothing even unique or exclusive about that experience at Universal. Like, you can literally enjoy that attraction from home with very little difference between when you actually go into the park. Really, the main difference for me at least is the pre-show. I mean, that pre-show is the greatest pre-show ever created. Like, dude, I rode the ride during 2020 without the pre-show. They weren't running it then. And let me tell you, the ride sucks without the pre-show. The pre-show carries, dude. It absolutely carries.
Ah, my little porkers. Are you going to spill the beans? Or is it luau time?
We don't know anything. Yeah. We know nothing. Yeah.
Thelonious, dig a pit, light a fire, and wrap them in banana leaves. And fetch my moo-moo.
Moo-moo?
Aloha!
So the bottom line is that, you know, people have mixed feelings about this. I think that, you know, there's many things to like about Shrek leaving, and there's also many things to not like about Shrek leaving. So it's a very bittersweet moment. But ultimately, I think we're all fairly optimistic for what Universal could bring to the table as far as what they can do to replace this. I mean, their last three editions, being Hagrid, Bourne, and of course Velocicoaster, have pretty much, you know, all been pretty great. So I don't think that anybody has any sort of pessimism towards what could come next. So without further ado, I'm not going to talk about the most likely one first. I'm going to talk about one that I think is pretty relevant to the closing of Shrek 4D, and that is Kung Fu Panda over in Hollywood. You see, this attraction replaced Shrek 4D over in Universal Studios Hollywood. However, it is also a 4D theater. It kept the 4D theater, added some trinkets around it, like, you know, a larger screen that encompasses the whole room, as well as a, well, I almost said improved pre-show. Let's not go too far.
Puppy reporting for duty.
But one interesting thing that it does have is that it's not themed to Kung Fu Panda. The building is not themed to Kung Fu Panda. It's themed to be the Dreamworks theater. Meaning that at any point in time when they feel like Kung Fu Panda's had its run, they don't need to tear down the building and start over from scratch. They can simply just take out the sign for Kung Fu Panda and change the film to some other Dreamworks property, and bada boom bada bing, you got a new attraction. And you might say, that's kind of like, man, that's kind of cheap, you know, it's not really all that interesting. Well, here's the thing though. For Universal Studios Hollywood, I mean, this park is more land constrained than Universal Studios Florida itself. You know, it cannot build a new attraction without tearing something down or, you know, really squeezing it in. So an attraction like this, where you don't have to tear things down and you can just simply swap in and swap out stuff to make a quote unquote new attraction, is genius for Universal Studios Hollywood while they still are dealing with these land constraints. I mean, it's perfect for that park. However, for Universal Studios Orlando, yes, prior to Epic Universe, this might have been an appealing option, but now that Epic Universe is on the way, Universal Studios Orlando has plenty of expansion options for a long time to come, right? They do not need to build an attraction that can be easily swapped out for something else. They don't need that. right? They'd much rather invest in a heavily immersive attraction that can last for 2+ decades. And on top of this, one of the reasons why Shrek 4D closed was because of its outdated ride system. The last thing they want to do is keep the outdated ride system and just try and modernize it. Like, that's not the path that Universal needs to go, or do they even want to go? That brings me to the most heavily rumored option, right? This option kind of came up somewhat recently, out of the blue. I don't necessarily know exactly where it came from, but the idea is that the attraction will be based on the Minions, with it being based on the Villian-Con convention from the Minions movie back in 2015. The funny part is about this is that the Villian-Con in the movie actually does take place in Orlando. That's kind of neat. The attraction would be either a walk-through attraction or a slow-moving dark ride, we still don't really know, that would take you through the many booths and exhibits in the Villian-Con convention. Presumably, while perusing these booths at the convention, we would see many villains testing out new inventions and weapons all around us, creating for a pretty interesting special effects show, while also cracking some pretty funny jokes. Now, because details are hard to come by on this, I am a little bit skeptical, especially considering you're talking about bringing more Despicable Me to the park. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to see a different IP come in, but when you talk about bringing a Minions attraction in, it makes a lot of sense. Minions, of course, is one of their most lucrative and popular and profitable brands that Universal owns themselves. And on top of this, you know, Despicable Me pretty much has a bigger presence in every other Universal park outside of Orlando. Like, every single other one has pretty much a land surrounding it. Universal Orlando is the only one that just has the single attraction. So clearly, Universal has found value in building a land, or at least, you know, making a large presence for Despicable Me in the parks, at least when it comes to other parks in the chain. However, they haven't done that yet for Orlando, so it would make a lot of sense to bring this in and kind of turn that entrance area of the park from Production Central into maybe a Despicable Me Minions themed land. I guess that could work. It would bring more immersion to the park, that's for sure. But one part of Universal Studios Florida that I do really like is the fact that, yes, you have some of these immersive lands like Diagon Alley and Simpsons and whatnot, but you also have areas of the park like New York, San Francisco, Hollywood, these places that, you know, are just kind of like generically themed that allow any IP to be plopped in there when need be. I kind of like that availability, right? I mean, Islands of Adventure and soon to be Epic Universe will be very much so immersive single IP lands. You know, I'd like to see Universal Studios Florida stay the way it is. That way Universal still has the option to put in random IPs that don't fit into any sort of single land or aren't big enough to house their own land, right? For me to see Shrek go away in favor of another immersive land, I don't know how much I really like it. It might make sense long term, but I don't know. I hope that they don't get rid of that, because I think that it will allow much more diversity and much more variety into the parks when you keep those kind of like plop and drop attraction spots open. And I think I know of a scenario where Universal can kind of have its cake and eat it too, a scenario which they be pleased in both regards, and I think that that's when you replace Shrek with Secret Life of Pets, the new dark ride attraction that opened up at Hollywood fairly recently. This attraction has come out to rave reviews, and it's obviously an attraction that Universal doesn't necessarily typically build too often. I mean, you look at Universal Studios Florida, the only other ride you can compare to this would have to be E.T., you know, so this would be a very unique option to bring into Universal Studios Florida and the resort in general. And on top of this, Universal can get the best of both worlds here, because Secret Life of Pets and Minions are both a part of what? Illumination. So you can make kind of a mini Illumination land out of that area, which wouldn't be as immersively themed as Minions, for instance, and would allow you at any point to swap out either of those two attractions for another Illumination property down the line, thus leaving it open as kind of still like a plop and drop area. I mean, for me personally, of the concrete options that we have to choose from, this is my favorite. I really do think that this is not only a great attraction, but that it would be different enough to fill in the void in Universal Studios Florida and the resort in general. And I really do think that it could last for a very long time. You know, even though the Secret Life of Pets property is kind of up in the air as whether or not that's going to continue to be popular going forward. Now, there is one small hitch, tiny issue, and that's that the ride doesn't fit in Shrek's plot. Or at least so I've heard. Apparently, in the current layout that it has in Hollywood, it would not fit in Shrek's plot in Orlando. However, you gotta remember that City of Pets was specifically designed to fit in a very specific place in Hollywood. I don't see why they couldn't slightly redesign the layout of that attraction to make it fit in Shrek 4D's plot. But let's just say that either they're not willing to do that or they're unable to do that. Here's an idea. Blue Man Group just recently closed in City Walk. That's literally right next to Universal Studios Florida. Why not put City for Pets, or really any attraction there, and do something else with Shrek's Land? An idea somewhat related to this that I saw getting tossed around online is that Universal should at least consider tearing down Shrek in favor of expanding the walkway in the front of the park. And it's an interesting idea because obviously bottlenecking and extreme crowds are very common in that area. However, I'm gonna have to disagree, mainly because you gotta remember that if they were to do that, there would still be bottlenecking, because at the end of the path, they're keeping Shrek and Donkey's meet and greet, which would keep that path kind of jutted out. So you still have a bottleneck over there. And in the front, you still have the Hello Kitty gift shop, which would also still be jutting out and creating a bottleneck. So you'd still have a bottleneck there, either way. And two, you gotta remember that there's a better solution to solving this issue, and that's that you gotta convince people to go down the Hollywood path. The right reason why it's so crowded there is because everyone just goes straight. Nobody really ever takes the Hollywood path. However, once Kid Zone's replaced with whatever it may be, Pokemon or some other, highly popular attraction, you already know that people are gonna start taking the Hollywood path. And all of a sudden that bottlenecking is gone, right? You gotta just get something over on that side of the park that convinces people, hey, I wanna go right first instead of everyone going straight. That being said, they could still build an attraction in Blue Man's spot and do something else with Shrek's Land, or just kind of hold on to it for now and wait for something better to come along. But I think realistically, they probably are going to replace Shrek, and if anything, they're going to let Blue Man sit for a while before thinking about what they want to do with that space.
Like that's ever gonna happen. What a load.
But you know what? I will say this about Shrek. I don't think his time is up at Universal. I don't think this is the end. Right? Shrek is still very popular, and as we know and as we've heard for years, they still plan on doing either a Shrek 5 or a reboot or something. Apparently there's a Puss in Boots movie coming out in like the next 2 years. I don't know what the heck that's about, but seriously, Shrek is not done. Universal is far from done with him, and I think he's far from done at the parks. And quite frankly, I think when he does come back, he's going to come back in a big way. He deserves a land. This property is just a gold mine for theme park creation. Like, I'm telling you, just look at Far, Far Away. There's so much detail in just that one area of one movie, really. I mean, you don't even look at Shrek the Third or anything like that. Just look at Shrek 2. There's so much detail there that you could literally do so much with it. And listen, they tried to do it in Universal Studios Singapore, and holy cow, did they mess up. I mean, that land is a complete disappointment. I'm not gonna get into it too much here. That's a topic for another day, but oh my god, I mean, they left so much on the table when there's unlimited possibilities with this property, and I still think that it's lucrative. I mean, just think about it. Like, dude, Disney does the Mickey ears, right? Why didn't Universal ever do Shrek ears? Why did that never catch on? I don't know, but you know what? It's not over yet. Shrek's coming back, I'm telling you.
Oh no!
So those are really our concrete options for what could happen with Shrek's Land. What could it be replaced with? Well, those are your options. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you think that, there's maybe some other option that I hadn't considered, maybe some IP that hasn't gotten a ride yet that maybe could go here. Let me know what you think in the comments. I love to hear what you have to say, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.